Hey everyone, happy Screaming Eagle Day.
Yep,
You've been enjoying. You're in we're in Austin again this week, of course. You're in Georgia, so you know
I
your
am.
usual spot. And I'm still here in good old Wisconsin. I just got done driving in a parade. My dad's a city official, so he's doing a
Nice,
parade, so I got to drive.
nice.
Uh, I haven't been to a parade in close to like 13, 14 years. So I've only been
Wow,
in parades for that long.
wow.
So
That's funny. That's funny.
we were just talking about it afterwards. Usually afterwards, my mom and I will get breakfast when my dad does, politician stuff. And we are like, oh yeah, what can we do better for next year? And we're just like, we could just, get more candy usually. So,
Yeah, yeah,
but yeah,
exactly.
it was actually pretty nice this year. Crowds are back and the weather wasn't too hot. So hope everyone's enjoying your 4th of July. Of course, this is from recording it by the time you listen to it. Hopefully you have a good weekend, probably. Because, of course, I'm editing again this year, these episodes while Jared's out, which is why last week's episode was recorded on Wednesday and didn't get published until yesterday. Because
It's
that's
all
how
right.
things go with me.
It's all right. There's other things that you need to do. It's not all
Yeah.
just editing podcasts.
Yeah.
If it was, there'd be a problem. But
Yeah. So that's what happens when I edit stuff. So let's get into this week's episode. Of course, it's episode 66. Also, I forgot to do the intro last week too. This last week's episode. Listen, this is why Jared does it now. He's
a
much
mess.
better at it. All right,
Yeah.
let's get into this week's news. First up, as a completion of this 50-second flight on the Red Planet, Ingenuity has successfully regained contact with the Perseverance rover. The expected loss of contact was due to the Martian helicopter landing behind a hill during a scouting flight to help researchers back on Earth better plan activities for Perseverance. JPL states that it is now receiving and looking over flight data from flight number 52, and Ingenuity's next flight could be coming in the next few weeks. This was also like a week ago when they released it, so could be this week, could be next week. They usually don't announce those flights like until afterwards, which is kind of annoying, but it is what it is. I saw this,
Yeah,
I'm like, oh yeah, it has been. I forgot to mention it. Yeah, it's been 2 months since we've heard word
yeah.
about Ingenuity.
It had been a while, and it's funny. Like you're right. They really don't talk about the flights until after they've happened, like, unless it
Mm-hmm.
was the 50th flight, which was I think an expected like it's gonna fly.
Yeah,
At this time. But yeah, it's been a while. And actually, after that 50th flight, which is kind of a big deal, we wrote something on it. They had done 2 more flights, and that second flight was completed, 2 months ago, but they didn't really know if it landed correctly
Yeah.
until now. And so I think it's funny because like I almost look at it as like Ingenuity is like the Mars Falcon 9 in the sense that it's becoming so routine to do this flight. Like
it
it
is.
has surpassed itself. Like its goal was to I forget, I can look it up, but like the number of flights it wanted to do, I mean, really just one. Like it just wanted to like fly, and
Yeah.
it's now done that 52 times. So like you can't necessarily say, oh yeah, probably landed, we're good, but based off of its track record, it's hard not to.
Yeah, and I'll have to look up who we exactly spoke to. I think we spoke to their Ingenuity's project manager back like the first couple. It was the first podcast that I was on actually for Space Explored. We interviewed them, and I remember it was like the mission was to see if you can attempt rotor flight on Mars, and they're gonna do that with a 5-flight like campaign within 1 month. And so now we're 2 years after that with like 52 flights in, and it has a whole new mission, which is kind of like it's kind of funny that it's that routine at this point again. So which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Let me look up and see if I can find this podcast. But yeah, so that's pretty much Ingenuity as best, right? I mean, that's JPL.
Still going
so, for
strong
ya.
and definitely playing a key role in the overall mission success for Perseverance as well. I mean, it's the first time that we've actually had a like aerial view of what's up ahead, and
Yeah.
that certainly helps, especially going into the Jezero crater where Perseverance is right now, where it gets a little rocky, literally. And having Ingenuity helps, like just to plan a little bit better about where you go. I mean, if you could, see where the traffic is up ahead, but it's launching a drone. That would be pretty helpful. And it's kind of the equivalent here, but on Mars. So.
Oh yeah, drones are pretty much used for a lot of things here on Earth, and it's pretty much they're doing the same thing. Like, which is actually why we usually cross our content, anything about Ingenuity, over the Drone TJ. So, so yeah, they're pretty much the same thing. All right, next up, last week. Oh my gosh, I'm starting to play a video in the background. My bad. All right, that blew out my ear. Last week, Virgin Galactic successfully completed its first commercial flight, which ended up being a research flight for Italy, which was while the majority of the company's tickets are purchased by tourists, Galactic will also have similar flights like this for solely be research based, allowing cheaper access to experiments that don't need to be launched to orbit but can be flown on sounding rockets. We talked about this a lot last week already, so we don't need to really push around too much about what happened, but it happened. What was it? Thursday morning, I think, like right off the bat, no delays.
Yep, Thursday morning, U.S. time, I guess.
I don't remember exactly. I should know what we talked about last week better, but I don't really remember. So we might repeat some of our conversations. But this was very different from Blue Origin missions. Like, this was.
Oh yeah.
Every Blue Origin mission is pretty much a tourist mission, and it's a bunch of rich people going up and doing some flips and coming back down. This was very much a, this was Italy's.
It was a scientific research mission. Yeah.
Yeah. There wasn't, like, even the live stream was like kind of toned down than normal for Virgin Galactic. It wasn't like a big show like they normally do. I don't even know. Did Richard Branson even like show up for this mission? Like, I don't even think.
I don't even know. I mean, it seemed like it was a very routine thing for them, which it's going to be, and we don't really know the results of the experiments yet. I mean, a lot of them were a little smaller. There isn't like a big telescope being launched, but as far as we understand, it went well. I mean, Virgin Galactic said it was a successful mission on all parts. So I mean, that's the summary. It went well. We know it went well.
Yeah.
It was a pretty cool, unique mission. And the other thing was, I thought the live stream was very well done. I mean, we had cabin views for quite a while after the rocket motor had shut off, and they were now in that like zero gravity state. So we kind of got to see them work around a little bit. I think one of the passengers pulled out an Italian flag, which is pretty cool too. They got like a nice little picture.
It was all business, pretty much. The Italian payload specialist, he was the colonel who commanded the Italian side of the mission. He got up, went to the back right away. Did his little stuff on the like the rack mountain experiments that they had to do. Like, I guess he had to press a bunch of buttons, like kind of start it up. The other two like pulled out their experiments from their pockets. Didn't even leave the chairs, which I guess if you look at it as a tourist flight, like, that sucks. You want to leave the chair and float around, but it's not a tourist flight.
They were there to do
they're working.
Scientists.
Yeah, they're working. So they're just doing their thing, and then the Virgin Galactic employee that was there, he got up, and I don't remember, he kind of like helped other people around, and I think he did some of his own experiments, and kind of like got everyone back in their seats, and then was done. So the one thing I could always use less of, but I understand, because when you look at these Virgin Galactic does it way less than Blue Origin, because Blue Origin, those streams are pretty much ran by their sales department. It's not really their communications department that really handles things there. It's a sales pitch every time. They always talk about their flights and how, because both of them have had employees fly on these missions, so they kind of like always bring someone who's flown, and they talk about how great it is, and like, you need to do it. I mean, that's like their point of making a sale, trying to get people to buy the tickets. But and I can always use less of that because it kind of gets repetitive, and it's a little pumped up than it probably is. But it's a sales pitch. I get it. I get why they're doing it. They want to sell their tickets. But I think I brought them up last week. I listened to a lot of Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway podcasts, and there's a different tone this week on them, because they always talk about how I think if you know Scott Galloway, I think he has his whole idea on I think he has Virgin Galactic switch with Virgin Orbit. So I think he kind of thought for the past like couple months that they defuncted, and I don't know, but like they always seem very negative on this, but this week was a little different. I'm like, oh well, like we have the tragedy of Ocean Gate, of course, and on the tail of this mission, and they were kind of more like, well, like it was a research flight, it's different, but like it's tourism still, so like we hate it. And I think this type of mission is the pretty much perfect, we're going to have a bunch of tourism on these flights still, but these type of missions are kind of like really where I think the future of the suborbital flights are going to go, where they have these opportunities to do research. So
definitely, like enabling the research is important, because like if you go on a Virgin Galactic's flight, I think they have I think it's $125,000 right now is their ticket price. So like if you have that money and really want to do it, then you can do it. Or if you're, from, in this case, the Italian government, or if you're, say, university that wants to sponsor something, you can also do, sign up, or, whatever the organization can, pay for a research mission to conduct research. And to, I guess, close this off a little bit, and recap from what we said last week, like the reason that, these are so beneficial is because it enables you to, for much cheaper than an orbital flight, do experiments that might require zero gravity. For example, there was a liquid mixing experiment that would produce foam when the liquid's mixed. However, it would only produce that foam not under Earth's gravity. And so you don't need to go to orbit to do that. You just need to get to microgravity or zero gravity, and that's what this flight enables you to do. And so it's like you're spending significantly less for this flight than it would be to put that experiment on orbit, which doesn't need to last that long. So very beneficial, and I think I really like what Virgin Galactic is doing.
Yeah, it's pocket change for like governments and even like large scale research institutions.
Exactly.
Pretty much pocket change to them. Do you know how long? It's at least 2 minutes. I think I counted of weightlessness.
I think that's about right. Yeah, which again is short compared to an orbital flight, but plenty of time.
Yeah, because I know there's options on sounding rockets that can get you to 3 minutes. But the issue with sounding rockets is that you have they're tiny. You gotta kind of fit them. Like they're big. They look decent sized rockets, but the actual payload area is like much smaller than the actual rocket size. Still, and then also it's not human control. Like you have to find a way to control it without humans. And I think it's probably just easier than the human to just press a button than it is to be like, well, if you're at this altitude, then make sure you activate this and this and this. So I'm sure some of those experiments could have been done on sounding rockets, which I think are probably cheaper still than this. But it's probably just easier to have 13 of them at once. Some of them, which we study human body, can't be done on sounding rockets. So perfect to do this here. All right, so Virgin Galactic, good job. Congrats. Hopefully to see more launches out of you guys, and hopefully more research missions rather than tourism. So
definitely.
All right, final topic today before we get to our main topic is, of course, SpaceX. Initially supposed to fly on a Russian Soyuz rocket, ESA's Euclid, I think is how you pronounce it. No. Telescope was switched to a SpaceX Falcon 9 post Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The rocket lifted off from Slick 40 from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. The mission will attempt to answer a big question of astronomers: why is the universe expansion accelerating?
Is it really pronounced Euclid?
Is it Euclid? I don't know. I don't remember. I only watched a bit of the live coverage of it. I think it's Euclid. It might be.
European. I also only saw a little bit of live coverage in which I don't think they said the name of the telescope the whole time. So just a little question.
all the SpaceX people are just can we not talk because I don't know how to pronounce it.
No. So we'll go with Euclid. That's not how I had been pronouncing it, but we'll go with that, and then I'll probably look it up later and be very angry.
Yeah, probably. So did you research into this at all? Like what? I know it's studying something to do with dark energy, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't fully understand how it's doing it.
They were talking a bit about that. I think basically it hold on 1 second. I'm pulling up.
I know it's mapping the entire universe. It's like doing image mapping, I guess, of the entire sky kind of, and it's trying to kind of because the big question is, so dark energy, you guys don't know the whole idea about dark energy, dark matter. It's kind of what makes up the rest of the universe that we can't see. I've always kind of looked at it as kind of the if you don't understand it, it's dark energy or dark matter, because it's not really fully understood, and they're just kind of we don't know what's happening. It's dark energy. I don't know if that's actually how they classify whether or not it's something being caused with that, but that's kind of how it makes sense in my head when people do explain it to me who are smarter than me. And so the universe, if you kind of like if you kind of like, study stars and galaxies of them moving, you'll see that everything's expanding away from us. And then that apparently that expand, and they kind of understand that it's, well, everything's moving, like universe is expanding, but they don't understand is that the expansion rate is accelerating, so everything's expanding faster. So that's kind of like what one of the big questions Euclid is trying to answer. It's kind of like why everything's that's happening.
Yeah, so let's quickly, I think let's actually back up a little bit and let's define dark matter and dark energy, which, like you said, are the two things that you could looking for, and also briefly describe. I'll describe what kind of where it's looking, and it's basically looking anywhere the Milky Way isn't, because the Milky Way has all these stars and dust and other whatnot, and our galaxy is like a disk, so it has places that it can look that aren't the galaxy. And I think it's going to do a couple like deep field observations as well. But the other thing is, in terms of positioning, it's going out to Lagrange point 1? 2.
I think it's 2. I think it's going to be out with...
It was a gamble.
You had, what, 6 options?
Yep, and I was like, let's call it close, because if
you were in the same quarter.
So dark matter is undetected form of matter that is thought to account for approximately 85% of the matter in the universe. Thought being a key word there, because like
it's one of those like we don't understand it, but we're just going to go with it anyways.
And then dark energy is a form of energy that is thought to permeate all of space and accelerate the expansion of the universe. So I think that's the other thing that we're really trying to figure out, and that we have been trying to figure out forever, is since the Big Bang, the universe has been expanding. And it's not only expanding still, but like expanding at faster and faster rates. And it's like, the question is obviously, why is it doing that? And kind of how? And the thought is that dark energy, whatever that is, kind of plays a role in that acceleration and expansion. Acceleration of the expansion. And so hopefully Euclid, what it's going to try to do is kind of map different portions of the sky and see, like, it's going to do some science. And and like you said, there are going to be some very smart people that know what to do with the data that Euclid captures and interpret it and hopefully do some studies on it. And we're going to see some really cool papers. And therefore, we'll see kind of maybe some answers finally.
I hate to say it, but this is the research that is really, really cool that no one's going to care about too. Like, this is going to be like, it's going to come out. There's going to be a really great press release. It's going to be a great paper. All of us are going to write about it. And all the science people are going to be like super excited about it, and like it'll get no views. Unless it's a really cool photo. Unless there's a really cool photo attached. But like I said, it's one of those things that like are very, very complicated. We don't really understand it, and we kind of like have to understand it if we want to kind of get down to the understand the universe more. So it's a very, very important mission to kind of to get to that knowledge. But yeah, it's a little complicated.
And the last thing here is like the Euclid telescope as a like telescope and like technology. I'm not exactly sure on the specifications, but one of the things it's doing to kind of like get these questions answered is measure like galaxies that are really far away and like their shapes, positions, and like kind of how fast and far they're moving, and like what might be influencing those based off of like, different galaxy positions relative to one another. And I'm going to try to make a comparison here that might be wrong, and I'd really love to be corrected on this because this is how I best understand it. And it's that like black holes you can't see to an extent, like the black hole itself, like you can see that whatever. But we can view, and this is how like the black hole at the center of our galaxy was discovered. We can view like the visible objects around it and see that they're all moving around and orbiting around something that isn't visibly there. And so hopefully with this dark matter and energy stuff, although it's dark, and we can't see it. Hopefully, there we can view the visible things and then therefore be able to interpret and say, okay, because this visible object is doing this and there's nothing else visible that should help it do this, then it's probably this, and so I think that's the best comparison that I can come up with, but I'd love to be corrected and maybe taught some things more, because this is like so far above like my understanding. Like I can tell you how the telescope might work, but not necessarily what data it's going to gather.
Yeah, I would love to speak for someone who actually like understands the
100%.
The science. Like those are the best people to talk to. Like just like someone who understands the data and like can actually communicate it. Like I love speaking with Mariba Jha from Privateer, because he's a teacher and he's like a scientist, so he understands the data and he can teach it. So it's like, oh, I just keep asking questions all the time and he just like explains it. I feel dumb doing it, but like I learn new things every time I speak with him. So I need more people like that in my life to kind of explain this. So if you do know like how this all works, please reach out.
And maybe we could talk to said person on a podcast in the future.
We have a thing
once
called
some data comes out.
Podcast that we can talk to people on. All right, so this actually topic is going to kind of leak into our main topic. So we're going to take a break right here before we talk about that, but it has to do with Europe. While today was supposed to be the last day that rocket was supposed to launch, it actually its life extended one more day, because I read a press release just before I came on here. So we'll talk about that topic after the break. All right, we're back and we're talking about Europe, which is not my most not my most prolific skill of information, but it's important this week because we had we were talking off camera. It's either Euclid or Euclid. Not exactly sure which one of our guesses are right on how you pronounce it. We should probably know that, but also lots of things happen. So, but we had that mission fly on a Falcon 9 that was originally supposed to be on a Soyuz that ESA can no longer have access to, and then now, supposedly supposed to be today, July 4th, we were supposed to have the final launch of the Ariane 5. Due to unfavorable winds, that got pushed back to tomorrow now. So Ariane 5 lives on one
tomorrow
more day.
Being July 5th.
Yes,
hopefully,
tomorrow being July 5th.
By the time this is out, it will have already launched.
By the time you've launched this, we'll be down one heavy lift rocket.
Which is kind of sad. I mean,
yeah,
I think the Ariane 5 is a very, very cool rocket. Like, super cool. Mm-hmm. For a lot of reasons, and I'm going to try not to, like, really blabble on about it, but, like, it did launch the James Webb Space Telescope and kind of nail that launch. So it's, like, it automatically has, like, a cool status to it just for doing that. Mm-hmm. But also, like, it's a really, really big, like, center core with one massive engine on the bottom, and then two, like, really, really big solid rocket motors on the side.
Yeah.
It's just a beefy, massive rocket.
Yeah. I love any rocket with big SRBs. They're just...
You can't go wrong.
Yeah, you can't go... Yeah. I like big SRBs, and yes. Anything with SRBs. I love Atlas 5s. Vulcan's going to be a great one because they have SRBs. Of course, SLS, Ariane 5. I mean, Ariane 6 is going to have SRBs. Vega is amazing because it is just an SRB. What was the other one? The Minotaur is also just a big SRB, pretty much. So I need to go find one of those launching over at Wallops one day. So I love SRBs are great. They're just the greatest way of getting this.
And the other thing that like I really like about the Ariane 5 is its launch location and French Guiana in South America. It's a little bit confusing because like a lot of people think, wait, it's launching from Europe, and it's like not the continent, but
technically, politically, it is.
Yeah, but no, it's not, because they get really confused about like how does that work. It launches.
French Guiana is considered.
Yeah,
it's the French spaceport. They call it Europe spaceport. Yeah,
exactly. Which like isn't a bad, like, that's totally like a reasonable, like, Europe can have that, place to launch, which, unfortunately we'll have one less rocket launching from it. But I think the whole area is really, really beautiful. I mean, I believe a couple of years ago, John Krause and Trevor Mullen were down there working out some really amazing shots. And
a bunch of the U.S. press went down there for for the James Webb Telescope.
They did,
I was
and they
like,
were just
I was one button away from going to that launch, which was the purchase
Wow.
button for the airline tickets. That was the button I was
Wow.
away, and I'm like, can't afford it.
yeah, it's tough to get down there. And that's what I was gonna say. It's not
Yeah.
like you just like land at the airport and like travel over. For example, landing in
Yeah.
Orlando and going over to Cape
It's
Canaveral.
not Orlando where you
or-
just pick up a Hertz, you go to the Hertz,
Yeah,
pick up a rental,
exactly.
or
You're
drive
like-
down.
You're kind of hiking, at least from what I've heard. But
I think
super
for
cool.
Webb they had like, these are the flights you should go on. You should arrive at this time. We'll have like shuttles and like all this stuff.
And I think-
like ESA does a really good job when you go down there to like help out foreign press.
Yeah.
Um,
And I believe Chris Gebhardt, formerly at NASA Spaceflight, was tweeting about how like he went from the U.S. over to France and then
France.
down, and
That's
it was
yeah.
just
I remember
like
because that was the
a
route I was going to
very-
take too.
yeah,
It's
and
it's 7 hours to France, I think, or 8 hours to France, depending on where you leave from, and then it's like
Yeah.
the same amount back. And it's like,
yeah.
or you can do like, it's 8 hours down the direct, but like the direct is like you're hopping through a bunch of small airports through Central America, which no one suggests you should do.
Yeah.
Unless you
tough.
are literally touching all your belongings with you. You're not checking any bags or like
Yeah.
hoping anything gets along with you. So
Yep.
yeah, everyone, because you can go Air France, because French Guiana is France. Like it's
Yep.
a country or it's a territory in South America, but like politically it's France. So all you need is to be able to fly to France. And so whatever, I don't know, do you need a visa to go to the EU with a US passport? I don't think so. Yeah, I think it's only if you're staying there or something.
Yeah.
So all you have to
prolonged
do is
periods of time.
have your passport if you're in the US, fly to France, fly
Well,
to Paris,
and-
and then you get a
and
flight
I'm gonna-
from Paris.
I'm going to say here while we're on the passport talk, just a quick side note here that I recently learned is that a lot of the EU countries and some others don't allow at least U.S. Citizens to travel and enter their country if their passport expires within 3 months of their stay. So
Interesting.
I've learned this the hard way. My family has learned this the hard way, and will hopefully not make this mistake again. But if you're planning on going to an EU country or a couple other countries in Europe, make sure your passport expires, if it does soon, at least 3 or 6, sometimes 6 months after.
Just get a fresh one. Just get a fresh,
however-
hot off the press passport.
Yes, however, there are some countries that allow you to go that, if it's valid for the duration of stay, like
Yeah.
Japan. But my whole point is that, you just need a passport, but there's also a lot of others. I mean, it's international travel. It's never going to be easy and stress-free.
But back to the main point.
Well, speaking of kind of travel and French Guiana and the Ariane 5, a while ago, and I wish I could remember this better, I spoke with one of the higher-ups at Arianespace who had been there since like the beginning of the Ariane 5 back in the early 2000s, which first attempted to launch in 2004 and then first fully successful launch in 2007. But he had said that like when they got like to French Guiana, it was like it was very hard to like get around. Like there weren't roads, there's no infrastructure when they were first there. Like everything there like pretty much had to be brought in by like boat. And I think he had mentioned they were like traveling down one of the rivers to like get to locations. Like it was basically river travel for a while and just like camping and hiking through weeds. Like it was like a treacherous like early part of the Arianespace history in French Guiana.
I remember there was a podcast, it was a NASA podcast. I don't know which one it is because I listen to the NASA cast, which is like all of their podcasts in one RSS feed that I have on Apple Podcasts. I don't remember which one it was, but they were talking about it was like there's Horizontal Launch Australia, I think it's what it's called, or Equatorial Launch Australia. Their first mission, all of the NASA people, and there was some press that went down too for this mission. They're just camping. There's just tents. All they had no infrastructure around the launch site. It was just tents.
Well, and I'd love to see like a book or documentary or something done on those early days. Maybe that's something I would maybe work on.
Really
but
cool.
like the early days of the Ariane 5 and at least like that launch port is like super cool because like I said, like James Webb has launched from there. Like there have been in Rosetta, like very significant missions launched from this location, which is like surprisingly remote. So I just think it'd be super cool to kind of learn about that history. And, unfortunately now, almost 20 years after its first launch attempt, we're seeing, the end of the Ariane 5.
Yeah, because you don't realize that the French Space Agency, or the French Space Program, is very, very long going. It predates kind of the European Space Agency, and it goes back to a very, very long time. They've been launching Ariane rockets for decades. And actually, the title of this topic is supposed to be "State of the European Launch Market Post Ariane 5," because I've written a couple things about this, and Europe has European Space Agency has stated multiple times that they want their own dedicated, they want their own secured, sovereign, I think they call it sovereign access to space, something like that.
Yeah, they don't want to have to send everything over to the U.S. for Falcon Heavy and Vulcan, whatever.
However,
else the
issue is that SpaceX is just so darn cheap. And when it comes to orbital and heavy lift launch, and right now Europe does have a big launch crisis on hands because they're retiring the Ariane 5, so an Ariane 6 probably is going to launch till next year at the earliest. So they don't
still
have a heavy
seeing
lift
delays,
launch.
lots of delays as that,
and that's
progresses.
It's still being delayed. It's not like we have a rocket, we're going to launch it. Oh, we're just finishing out tests, kind of like SLS. It was always like, well, at least we have a rocket being built. And they do have, I think, the first Ariane 6 is in production and in final manufacturing, but literally SLS was just sitting there almost fully constructed, and they're just finalizing some one item things. This is just still being full on delayed, and so then you have, is it Avios? I think it's called. I actually have the link. Hold on, it is Avios, Avio, who's the company that builds Vega, because they have Vega C that's offline, and that probably won't launch until they probably won't return the flight till next year either. That just announced that they had an issue with the same stage in a test fairing.
I'd like to take a second
pressure.
actually to correct something I said earlier, date-wise. I had my dates mixed up. Speaking of the Ariane 5 ECA, which is the latest variant, first launch attempt was a failure in 2002, and the first successful launch was 2005 of the Ariane 5 ECA variant. Multiple other variants, which we don't need to get into, but the ECA variant has been the longest lasting variant. And
was that the failure though? Was it that it underperformed, but it still made the orbit? Or was that
that first flight? I'm not sure.
The one that underperformed, but whatever. The current status of European space is kind of rough. There's a lot of different companies. If you're really into European space, the updates, and someone who really knows the European space market, because I'm in the U.S., it's kind of hard sometimes to get in, to stay up to date with European companies because time zones are different. But it's kind of sometimes hard to set up times to talk. Usually they're pretty cool about it, so they kind of help us out. But there's a newsletter called Europe in Space, or Europe in Spaceflight, which is a really, really good newsletter that I've been reading. And I just read it over. It's kind of the reason why I made this, is because of course there's several different companies coming on to French Guiana to launch. So while there's kind of the dwindling rockets, so they have Ariane 5 retiring, so there's no more heavy launch. They've lost access to Soyuz because they didn't build a medium lift launcher. They purchased them from Russia. Vega C is offline for another year, and then Avio is still trying to want to get the regular Vega up online again, I guess, to kind of take over some of those light launch capabilities. But their launch market is still in a startup phase. There's no Firefly or Rocket Lab or what would be an ABL, who's in that final stage of development where they're launching rockets. There's PLD Space, which I think is probably the closest, but they're launching out of France, and I guess they have some weird laws over there with fire protection where they can't launch during certain seasons to help them not have any sort of wildfires.
Interesting.
So they're delayed and they're held back by that. So that's really, I think PLD Space really is the only company that over there in Europe that's capable at that final stage. But even then, they're small set launchers. There's no larger rockets coming out of commercially other than out of Ariane space.
I think one of the big questions is once Ariane 6 gets online, will they be relying heavily on Ariane 6? Are we gonna actually see these, or maybe any new, private launch companies show up enough to I guess be, have a sustainable, launch? Because I guess what I'm trying to say is Europe and the European Space Agency will have plenty of things to launch and do.
Yeah.
But it's like, I think a lot of their stuff tends to be rather large. And so you need larger rockets, which are obviously not as easy to build, as some small sat launchers. Not that those are easy either. But my point is, like, do you think that the Ariane 6 is going to be relied on just as heavily as the Ariane 5 is now? Or do you think that something else is going to show up?
Yeah, it's like, how can, for the longest time, Europe has relied on Arianespace as like its first sole commercial contractor. It's like ULA was before SpaceX showed up. Like, it's pretty much the only game in town if you want something dedicated launch out of Europe. Which for Europe, the question is, does every continent? Because I guess country, you can pretty much look at EU, which is its own country, because they kind of the economies kind of act like one. Does every single region, I guess you can call it, need its own dedicated launcher? Does Europe need to have a launcher, or does Europe need to have as thriving of a space launch market as the U.S. is? Or does Europe specialize? Do they build better? Are they the satellite manufacturer of the world? Do they build the best satellites and the cheapest satellites and the stuff like that? Which I think they're pretty well ahead on. Like, they built some pretty good satellites over there in Europe, and some pretty good space station components and stuff like that. Like Canada, they build some good robotics. There'll always people you go to when you go to robotics.
Whenever there's a new big satellite launching, like, that is a collaboration, like, definitely go check to see who the collaborators are, because like ESA is almost always a collaborator on some of these big launches, because they're very good at what they do. Sometimes they are the sole manufacturer or developer or whatever of certain satellites. But like, if I were building a big satellite for a big mission, then I would probably reach out to ESA. Not that
ESA,
I do that.
or like was it Thales Alenia or Alenia?
Yep.
It was like Airbus. I don't know. I think there's Airbus. There's the European sector of Airbus, and there's the U.S. sector of Airbus. But I think they have a big satellite manufacturing over in Europe as well.
I'm pretty sure.
But if you look over here on the U.S. side, like, there's a lot of like microsatellite, builders, and of course they're all, like, a lot of them are attached to the small sat launchers. Like, you have Phantom Space is a company that I just listened to their to Jim Cantrell's interview with Payload Space. I always thought it was like not a serious company, but like it seems I was wrong on that one. They are very much a serious company trying to build a serious rocket this time. The Phantom Space wants to do something like that. Astra wants to do like satellite manufacturing. Rocket Lab's in the satellite manufacturing. SpaceX is in satellite manufacturing. They're all like side businesses onto another business, which doesn't degrade their quality probably, but it definitely is not like a main soul of innovation, like, sole manufacturer of satellites. Like, I'm trying to think of a company like Redwire Space. I think it's like one of those, or they do a lot of stuff. But like some company like that, or something that Europe can totally take care of and kind of be like that specialty market. However, they really want a launcher. They want a crew launch system. They want their own kind of like space program. They kind of compete. They kind of want to be NASA. They would like to be NASA. I think a lot of them are tired of being the sideshow of NASA.
Well, and I think like one important characteristic of the Ariane 6 that I'd like to point out, because I'm a huge fan of it on the Ariane 5, and I'm very glad it's still a capability on the Ariane 6, is the dual launch capability, which is that capability to basically launch two very large satellites. Just for example, this final Ariane 5 launch will see that with the launch of two very large satellites. And I think that's honestly something, we don't really have that ability, at least.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that SpaceX hasn't stolen that idea.
But also, like, SpaceX, I don't think, and I'm not sure on the exact fairing numbers, but I don't think that SpaceX can right now launch two satellites of significant size, at least definitely not as big as Ariane 6 and Ariane 5 can.
Maybe on their future version of the Falcon Heavy with the extended nose cone? Because I think it's probably a height issue. It's probably a height issue more than a width, because I think the widths are pretty close. It's probably a height issue.
But that's like that's pretty critical, because if you're launching to a geostationary transfer orbit or whatever, then like being able to get two, like it's kind of the definition of killing two birds with one stone, because you have basically a rideshare mission that is has two very large satellites, and that's a lot of mass. I don't know the exact I can try to find it. The total payload mass for this final Ariane 5 launch is just under 7,000 kilograms, which is around 15,500 pounds. So like that's heavy.
That's
I think it's split pretty evenly between those two satellites. But that is something, talking about being unique, and Europe and ESA, in the European Union having their own thing, like that's something pretty unique. Because if I'm a satellite manufacturer company that is building a large satellite, instead of paying for the full ride on a Falcon Heavy or a Vulcan or Delta IV Heavy, that's almost done too, but another heavy lift launcher from the US, I might go send it over to Arianespace and say, hey, do you have anyone else, who's wanting to launch a similar size satellite? Let's split it.
Yeah.
That allows you to put more into the satellite itself. So that's definitely something unique that they have, going for them in a way that I'm very happy to see continue on to the Ariane 6.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any bonus they get from being closer to the equator. Like that could be something. I mean, but because we've seen equatorial, we've seen, Tropics flew to the equator and then did a inclination change. So like it's possible.
Very crazy.
They did that from Virginia. So they did that from Virginia. So I know there's some performance gain you get from being close to the equator, but it seems like we might be past that in a grand scheme of things. Like when you look at micro scale, like in a macro scale, we're probably away from that, but in a micro scale, when you look at like individual launchers, and like there might be some performance gains there that actually means something. But we're looking at like Falcon 9 and like Electron, they seem to be doing just fine launching further north. But Europe, I mean, their space program, I mean, it's taken a slight, I mean, their economy has also taken a slight hit over the past few years as well, from COVID to inflation to the invasion of Ukraine, to a lot of things. But they seem to, the space flight seems to kind of be growing there more that has been in the past few years. Like we see, I would have to get a list. I know there's like 4 or 5 different rocket startups that are like coming onto the scene over there in Europe.
Definitely.
Whether or not they can compete with the companies like over in the United States and of course Electron, however you pronounce that, however you consider that a U.S. or a New Zealand launcher, but whether or not they can consider, I usually throw it in with the U.S. If whether or not they can compete, whether you can compete with the U.S. launchers, I think it's still up in the air. I think ESA will like it very much. We'll see maybe if ESA kind of carries them along with contracts to keep them there, like subsidize the market. However, the politics in Europe is insanely difficult as well. It's like on a whole other scale, because you have the EU politics, and then you have the separate nations politics, and they kind of all have to agree, which usually doesn't work as well as like even here. So trying to get everyone to agree.
Like you raise a good point. It's like the European Space Agency is like
it's a collection of
a bunch of countries. Yeah, it's not. It's not just like it's not just one body governing the European Space Agency. But
which we see in the Virgin Galactic flight. Virgin Galactic, it wasn't through the ESA. Like even their colonel who looks to go to space, it isn't through ESA. This is through the Italian Air Force and the Italian Research Council, or it might be Commission, but I think it's Council.
I think it's Council.
Yeah, it's through separate organizations, not through the ESA. So politics over there is just kind of weird on where funding comes from, and like different programs doing different things. Like we had Sophia, which was with Germany, but it wasn't through ESA. That was through Germany.
Yeah.
So like things are weird over there, and who will fund who? Because I know Rocket Factory Augsburg is like another really promisable company out of Europe that is going to be launching for French Guiana. And they're from Germany, and I don't know like how they're going to be helping with ESA has some role in their, supporting them, but like they're Germany, so they could also have a DSLR or DS something like that, whatever their space agency is.
And I think the next part to this topic would be like not only the European launch market, but like the European space market in general. Not that we have something like dropping out of the European Space Agency at the moment, but like it has always kind of been just a weird like, what's the best move? Do you collaborate with ESA and other countries, or do you use a science organization within your own country? Like, what are the benefits? What are the drawbacks?
Yep.
You know, like, how does that exactly work? And, you know, I think to quickly answer that, it could be that, you know, if you're, you know, building a satellite or whatever, and there are multiple countries involved in building this satellite, then it's probably a good thing to just collaborate with ESA. You know, that's a good body to govern this collaboration within Europe. But if it's like Sophia, for example, where you're working with a certain, you know, organization in a country, it might make sense to just work with that country versus the entire European Space Agency.
Their government liaison. That's what we called our employee when at my last company, but it must be really complex. They must have a lot. They have to work with multiple government agencies. So there's just a lot of questions with Europe.
And to get kind of back to the just what will the state be now that Ariane 5's gone, I think one thing it's important to note that like the Ariane 5 wasn't like it was obviously playing a very big role in the European launch market, but it's also not like it's leaving and there's a big gaping hole. Like for a little bit while Ariane 6 hasn't launched, you know, there kind of will be almost, but like Ariane 6 that, you know, it has payloads that are ready to launch on it, like, or, you know, that will launch. So it's not like there's nothing that's there. Like the Ariane 6 will take over the Ariane 5's job and will hopefully do as just as good of a job as Ariane 5 did. And so like, it's almost just a replacement. We're just in the time where there isn't one. And so I think it would be great to revisit this topic in 3 or 4 years and see, you know, are there any private companies that have shown up and progressed and done better and are now launching routinely? And B, what's the state of the Ariane 6 and how many times have it launched, and compare that to Ariane 5? Because if it's the same or better, and, you know, higher launch cadence as the Ariane 5, then I'd say it's trending in the right direction. If it's lower, then I think there's some other questions that could be asked there.
Yeah, like this is something we have to keep an eye on over the next few years to see like who makes it, who doesn't, and then like kind of how the market really develops and local suppliers, local people who need to launch their satellites, and local companies who can do it. Of course, then we got to throw in Starship into the mix, and how that's going to mess up the whole launch market.
No, yeah,
we don't have time. We don't have time to talk about that one.
No, we don't.
We got to run up on our time now. Kind of end the episode because again, we have a great conversation, Austin. Maybe we need to have you on more often. Great conversations.
Maybe so.
That we keep going.
Hopefully, maybe I need to be in a different location each time too. I'll travel to a new state every time.
That's a great idea. All right, so that's it for this week's episode of the Space Explored podcast. Appreciate anyone who leaves a review and leaves a comment and asks us questions, and we would love to answer them in future episodes as well. You can follow along my coverage over at spaceexplored.com. You can, of course, join our Discord. I'm posting things in there. Please come see them. And you can also follow not Jared. Jared's going to be back next week. Austin, you can follow Austin. Where can they find you on?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, austin.desisto, and Twitter is austin.desisto.
Awesome. And you can, of course, listen to us on all the major podcasting sites, including Apple, Google, Spotify, Overcast, whatever, and at spaceexplored.com. See you guys all next week.